Privet, Katila, Waningruski desu. So, as you guys know, because you're probably sitting at your home at the moment because of the lockdown, there's been a nationwide, or actually worldwide, pandemic that is sweeping the globe. So far, as of the making of this video, over 250,000 have been infected, with over 10,000 deaths. And I think I wrote this script when like a day or two ago. It might be, I think it's like 300,000 infected. It's exponentially getting shittier. 2020 is getting off to a pretty shit start. And I was actually kind of hopeful for this year, to be quite honest with you. But anyway, this virus originated in China, and as far as I know, it was because people wanted to eat bat soup. Don't ask me why. If you look at the pictures of this bat soup, it looks like absolutely disgusting. I mean, at least in my understanding, from the looks of it, it looked pretty. I don't know how anyone would eat that, but in my opinion, and basically because of that, it crossed from like bats to humans. It has caused, this virus has caused border closings, forced people to stay at home with family. Has the American government, considering giving all adults money. So can we get like a round of applause for like the based Corona-chan? But in all seriousness, this virus has, crashed the stock market, big line go down, put our economy on lockdown, showed the complete inadequacy of our healthcare system, has closed our borders, and grinded our society to a halt. So out of all this mess that's going on, and we're still going through it, what can we learn from the coronavirus? What can we do as a society to make sure that when another pandemic hits, and even a worse one will come eventually, like a super bug, like an antibiotic bug, how can we make sure we are prepared and not caught off guard like we were today, in this Corona-chan, or coronavirus, I should say. So basically in this, I have a list of 6 reasons which are kind of mostly United States based, but a lot of these reasons could be applied to basically any other country on Earth. So let's begin with the reasons, shall we? So the first lesson which I think we can learn, and I think it's one of the most obvious lessons, and it's also one of the most damning that we don't already have this kind of idea in place, or just this as a situation, but the nation state must remain self-sufficient in essential goods. So basically, if you guys didn't know, apparently a ton of what this virus pandemic showed is that a ton of our medical supplies, essential ones in fact, are being produced in China. Like, why? Why should that be? So one of the biggest pillars of globalization, that of the free flow of goods, has taken such a radical extreme, that we took it to such a radical extreme extent that we are basically outsourcing all our ability to create essential goods in our nation. And it's basically a shame. So in terms of self-sufficiency, what do I mean by that? So there's a few questions we need to ask ourselves. So ask yourselves this. So it's like a situation. If the world had to be shut down, like, it is right now, can we survive indefinitely? Or, in terms of long term, like, what if the whole world, except your country, just sunk underwater? Let's just say just submerged into, like, Poseidon's realm, and, like, only your country was the only landmass left. Can you continue to survive? Questions like, can we grow our own food and feed our own people? How about can we use our own water reserves to, give clean water to all our people? Can we produce and maintain our own electricity and our electrical needs? In other situations, like, can we mass produce our own munitions for war? Or healthcare products like ventilators and face masks? Can we do all these types of things? So when I talk about all these things, this isn't like a battle between like free trade and protectionism. That's a whole other conversation. But in terms of a lesson we have to learn from this pandemic, is that if you're a serious country and you can't do the above things that are listed, you are basically officially enslaved by globalization. And basically, it's a shame that we are so tied up with the world that when we need to disengage to protect us from a pandemic, it would harm us. Or we can't even do it even if we wanted to, because, it's all made in China. Now, I understand we can't be self-sufficient in everything. Like, for example, we might not be able to produce enough coconuts. Like, everyone wants to drink coconut milk, coconut flavor, whatever. We might not be able to get that because the United States itself can't produce it. We have to get it from other countries. But that's the purpose of trade in a good situation, the exchange of goods we don't for things we don't have, So trade is all fine in that, but what can we survive a blockade, a sanction, a pandemic shutdown? Those are the questions. And, we don't need to have, like, we might not be able to get, like, Swiss chocolate or something, maybe something that's unique to a certain country, but the essential goods, we have to be able to survive on our own. And the official word for this is, like, autocracy or whatever I think it's called. So basically, we have to have a type of system where we don't have to depend on the whole world for our survival and sustainability. The second lesson in all of this is basically kind of continuation of the first. And it's a rebuke towards mass unrestricted globalization. And that is that immigration must be controlled. From when I'm going through, like, these pandemic, my business teacher said this, she said, so, like, I hear people that say, like, we live in an interconnected world and that it's impossible. We cannot disentangle ourselves. Bullshit. We can. Nation states still do have the power to control who can come in, who can immigrate, and what standards we place if you want to come in. It's not like, oh, whoops, we just gave up all our power to do whatever we can with our country. We became too globalized. Well, that's just, we could disentangle ourselves. Now, it might be hard because we've been trying to interconnect too much at the expense of the nation state. So obviously, in a good time, we need to be starting to be able to disengage if we have to. And this is what these first 2 points are about it. Basically, so just because we are more connected because of, like, technology does not mean our society is just screwed when it comes to enforcing standards. So basically, when diseases spread really easily from mass migration and loose borders, and thus one of the lessons we can learn is that we must have strict standards for entry and strict border control, and not just strict, like, closed borders, like we're not accepting anyone at all. Can we do that? Can we survive that? And if we do shut down our borders, will that affect us economically and everywhere and every other metric? If it harms us horribly, well then, we might have been too interconnected with the world because of that. There's nothing wrong in a good situation with people kind of traveling or studying in your country. Obviously, you guys know my immigration thoughts on immigration in general, but in a pandemic situation, we have to be able to shut the borders and be okay with that for at least a few months. It'd be fine if we shut our borders to immigration for the next few years. That'd be pretty cool, but that's a whole other conversation. So basically, so if a giant pandemic is on loose, we must be able to shut our borders and be able to manage without it, basically. So in short, control our borders, set high standards, and be able to maintain ourselves without the importation of mass amounts of people. As basically migration is what causes these pandemics to spread in the first place. And basically, yeah. And, if we control our borders, we'll pretty much be, and we do it quickly, we will have a good chance of surviving whatever next plague comes upon us. Alright, now that we have critiqued our total dependence on globalization, we now need to move on to lessons about healthcare and the actual response to the pandemic. What can we learn from that? So, for example, we can produce and rely on our own, and, let's say, for hypothetically, we can produce and rely on our own, and we shut down our borders. But let's say a pandemic starts right here in the United States, or in your home country. Or if we start seeing a few cases, like, let's say we close the borders let's say no one knew about this until it was too late, and there's some cases here already after we shut down our borders. Well, what do we do? So, first, our healthcare system itself. Let's forget the pandemic response. We have to kind of restructure our healthcare system. So I'm not going to talk about healthcare. That's for another thing. First of all, we need to have a universal healthcare system. So firstly, in the States, your healthcare is tied to your job. And that is just simply absurd. Like, what if you get laid off? Like what's happening right now? You lose your healthcare. And for Pete's sake, we also have to get rid of this complicated web of insurance on like what hospitals or what doctors you can visit, what is covered and what isn't. This is not helpful at all. We need to simplify it. we could spend a whole video talking about healthcare, but for the sake of this video, I'm gonna keep it simple. In my opinion, everyone should be covered by a single insurance system, like a Canadian one. Whatever is not covered under this, we could debate what is covered, what is not, but whatever is not covered or whatever has a small cost to it can be covered by supplemental private insurance. That way, all legal American citizens can get tested, treated without having to worry about cost, what doctor they seek, what hospital they go to, etc. So when a pandemic does happen, all Americans can be treated and tested without the complications. So yeah, that's the healthcare system in place. Just simplify it, and it has to be, that we could go on and on about the healthcare system in general, but just for the sake of having a lesson from this pandemic is having it be more simplified. None of this insurance jargon. Now, what about the pandemic response itself? Now, basically, no matter what system you have in place, if half of your population gets sick, your hospitals are going to be overcrowded, and you can lose control very fast. From America to Italy, these both have different types of healthcare systems, but they both are being overcrowded, and they're both getting strained. So what do we do? Basically, first of all, even without a pandemic, we need to make nursing and medical school way less expensive because we need more doctors and nurses, etc. If I remember correctly, we have less doctors per capita than even like a lot of other nations, developed nations, I should say. And we need more hospital beds, etc., and stuff like that. So basically, what I would argue is we need some sort of healthcare reserve system, like a healthcare corps. Maybe that's in FEMA. Maybe that's already in place. I'm just not an expert on it, maybe. But basically, a system where we can, when we detect a pandemic or cases of a pandemic, we can rapidly deploy medical clinics to affected areas. Roll out testing to everyone, like how they're doing in South. Everyone's getting tested. Just roll out testing out the wazoo. And directed towards infected areas and lock those things down. And because if you could lock it down within a certain area, you don't have to lock down the whole country. Because if you get it out of control, then you have to lock down more and more areas. If you could isolate it and test it and shut it down in that area, it'd be good. And basically, you would roll out, medical clinics, more hospital beds. It might be more amateurish, but you have to kind of make sure people have a place where they get tested, treated, etc. This would be working in conjunction with the state governments, of course. Basically, lockdowns and shutdowns are basically a response of last resort if we dragged our feet. Ideally, it wouldn't spread here at all, or if it did, we would contain it to certain areas and treat it and lock it out there. But being able to rapidly deploy testing sites and basically have like a stockpile of ventilators, masks, etc., whatever other healthcare products we need to help contain this virus is a must. So basically, rapid response, free treatment, and stockpiling of essential medical supplies with the ability to create and develop more so our healthcare system can handle the pressure of a pandemic, and basically the resources are pooled. And also, obviously, we would spend some on trying to find ways to cure this pandemic. And this is probably one of the other ways I would probably work in an international sense. I'm not really an internationalist, but this is a way we could work together with the globe in terms of working out, trying to get a vaccine and such like that. So, all right. We made our healthcare system less complicated. And we have a reserve that we can rapidly mobilize to contain whatever virus arrives on our shores. But what happens if things go south? What if our economy takes a nosedive, as it is happening right now? First, there's a few points for this economic thing, which is a whole other conversation, but let's start with the workers themselves, the people getting laid off because of the lockdown. What's some lessons we could learn that could help us in this situation? First, okay, let's have paid sick leave be part of federal law. If you get sick, you should be able to stay home and not get fired. And basically, because he's like, hey, if you got sick with the virus, you should be able to stay home. Like, oh, maybe I should go to work and infect a few people because I need to get money. That shouldn't be the case. You should be able to go home if you're sick. Also, if it does come to mass lockdowns and shutdowns for a period of, let's say, 3 months, so let's say the worst case scenario, let's say we exhaust all these options and we have to shut everything down. We need to make sure that when things start getting under control and, stores start reopening, when this, this mini recession, when this clock down, it's lifted, how do we re-stimulate the economy? We need to make sure we re-stimulate. How do we shoot a shot of adrenaline into the economy? to make it start turning again. And the best way you could do this is through emergency basic income. Basically, the way I would do is that through the Social Security system, every legal American citizen gets $1,500 just shipped to your address, just as they do for Social Security. Just they're very efficient at it. No strings, no means testing, no income requirements or whatever. You could even call it Trump bucks. Donald Trump could call it Trump bucks for political points or whatever. Whatever you want. But in terms of just the economic lesson, we need to give money to people's hands so they can spend it, and we could avoid a Great Depression level of poverty and unemployment, and then thus that money can re-stimulate the economy. None of this hocus pocus means tested crap. Also, this would be a good time to rework our work balance with technology. With technology, we should be able to utilize more working from home and other alternative methods instead of just strictly the traditional way of just going to a physical space for work. Having more of those options in the economy would be a plus as well. All right, so that's economics from the worker end. But what about the business end, right? What about the business side of it? So one flaw that I see is in this current situation is all these massive corporations, from restaurants to hotels to airlines. They want hundreds of billions of dollars in bailouts and handouts, or else they say they will implode. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand how horrible it will be if they go under, because they hire hundreds of thousands of people. But first, let me say this. To avoid a situation like what's going on right now, like what I'm describing, we need strong antitrust enforcement. A lot of these big companies need to be broken up into tinier companies. Again, if they are too big to fail, they are too big to exist, as the saying goes, right? So, for companies that, if you're too big, you have to be broke. You can't be such a big threat to the economy that if you're almost shutting down, the people have to bail you out all the time. However, some companies are just natural going monopolies, like airlines. Like, you can't have hundreds of different types of airline companies. That's just not efficient and it doesn't work. So what happens when these so-called strategic industries go under? What we need to do 100% is, what we first of all need to do is 100% end the system where big companies socialize the losses, but privatize the profits, so to speak. So that's kind of the term of it. The way you do that, just in my layman's idea of it, is that if they're going to be safe by the government is going to buy a big chunk of their shares, or takes a big chunk of their company ownership of them, and they are given a loan with a low interest, which they must pay back. So this is a way the government can actually make money out of this. And basically, perhaps like some sort of temporary nationalization, maybe. I mean, I don't know the whole maybe this nationalization is the right word, but they can't just get money and then just go out. There has to be some sort of corporate responsibility that comes with a bailout. Sometimes they shouldn't even get, but in terms of this, you can't allow them, for example, to once they get the money, to buy back stocks and give themselves huge bonuses when they get bailed out by the taxpayers. So basically, if these businesses want public funds, they must work for public benefit and play by public rules. As for small businesses, they have, since they had to close down because of government lockdown orders, they too must be given, no interest loans so they can remain operational. As this was a government order for them to close themselves to customers, it's only fair for them to be able to remain operational during the once the shutdown is over, they'll be able to reopen. They can't just, it's kind of unfair. The government just leaves them out to dry, at least for small businesses. So that's another thing. So that's for the business side. All right, so now we are on our final lesson that I think we need to learn from this old coronavirus situation. So here's the last lesson, and it's going to be my final thoughts as well. So when times are good and the economy is roaring, for the love of God, we need to start stockpiling and have emergency reserve. This is just for our personal lives, for our companies, and for the government. We can't just be like, oh, things will always be great, because sometimes they won't be. Who knew that a month ago that this would happen, right? So, this means that we should ideally run surpluses in the federal government and have the Federal Reserve have higher interest rates than normal, as not only is that good fiscal and monetary discipline, but when times do get bad, we could go into a deficit, and we will have more tools and more resources available for us to help manage the economic crisis and the health pandemic. So basically, we'll be, once this all, we need to be basically more acknowledgement that bad things will happen. It can't always be a good time. So in terms of final thoughts, now, if a super serious bug comes around, something that, will take a year or even years to overcome, like let's, right now they think we could get over this in a few months, but let's say it takes years, right? Let's say a super horrible, not just like a few thousand people might die, millions might die. Let's say millions are going to be dead by a super bug that comes, right? Can we overcome, and can we brace and prepare and have some sacrifice? Because we're not used to that in the West. We might actually have to start, having to have sacrifice. And this is where a high trust and socially cohesive society can come into play. This is where our civil society can help us manage. If we have a strong civil society, this could help us manage through tough times. It might be a temporary government measure might work for a few, for maybe a 3 or 4 month period. But this might not work out if this takes years, and if a huge pandemic happens, like a really, really bad one, like millions die. Ultimately, though, we will overcome. We will overcome how big the next pandemic is, sooner or later. And as Teddy Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, because we will overcome, it will be beat, and we will persevere, and it's only a matter of time. Strong, socially cohesive societies with a strong civil society will greatly help us if we have to fight say a biowarfare virus, an antibiotic virus, or whatever. But with time, we will overcome whatever comes our way. This is just we will overcome. We might suffer, we might have to sacrifice. And I'm not trying to overwhelm this virus, because I think we will overcome this in a few relatively short amount of time. But I'm just saying in a horrible scenario where millions are dead, from a more worse bug like a biowarfare one, we have to be prepared to stand strong and stand tall. And I believe we can, because that's what we've always done. We've been through a lot worse, and we will go through whatever this is. So that was my video. I hope you guys very enjoyed it very much. Please like, comment, and subscribe especially. And if you really liked my video, and also share it. And if you really liked it, please check out my Patreon, if you so wish to see any of the benefits. So aim high, wander on, from America with Russian love.